Hey you guys, it's Britt. Tonight we're here to talk about a couple of things. I had a really short little update on Ruby Franke and her journals, which I covered a couple of videos back, and I'd also like to talk to you about the second interview that Kevin did with law enforcement officers. It was shocking, confusing, all of the things. It was crazier than what I was expecting to hear in that interview, but it certainly had a lot of takeaways, which I have a lot of notes. So if you're interested in either of those, please keep watching. All right, you guys, so first things first, I would like to talk about Ruby Franke's journals for just a quick second. There has been a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, that's an unfair assessment. There has been a fair amount of questions as to what's up with the journals. Like, why was she obsessively writing these journals? What does that have to do with her association with LDS and Mormonism and all of the things? So I heard a bishop or either a present or former bishop talk about this on TikTok, and I wanted to kind of fact check as to what does the LDS website actually say about journaling. And it was pretty much what that man said, but right here on their website, it says, through his prophets, the Lord has commanded each of us to keep a journal. As we record our activities and feelings, we can more clearly see the Lord's influence in our lives. And I will link this in my description box in case y'all want to take a deeper look at it. But the journals were not meaningless to Ruby. It wasn't somebody who just one day picked up and started journaling and detailing the abuse that she was inflicting upon her children. It ties back to her faith. And I don't even want to call it her faith because, in my opinion, faith is not extremism. Faith is not abusing your children in the name of God and saying that your children are possessed. I don't think that that is a fair description of what faith is to most of us who have a normal perspective on things, if that makes sense. So that's the thing with the journals. Now let's get into what really just set me off, and that is Kevin Franke's second interview with law enforcement officers. So as I mentioned, I had a lot of takeaways, and I'm going to summarize what Kevin said in this interview. This is not going to be a normal reaction because I took so many notes that it basically encapsulates everything that Kevin covered, minus maybe a couple of things along the way. But let's just start at the top. So Kevin immediately asks, have you found the pen papers? And he goes into this detail of how they had purchased a leather folder. It was about 3 inches thick and had it engraved, the pen papers. And Ruby wrote detailed notes about all interactions with Jodi and Pam Bodtchner, who, as a reminder, is also part of Connections. That is where Ruby's other children were located on the day of the raid. Pam actually has a huge role to play in all of this, a much larger role than what was initially kind of expected, if I can say that. Her role was, it was kind of like a third wheel situation at a certain point in time. We'll get there. But nevertheless, Ruby would detail notes about all interactions with Jodi and Pam in this leather folder called the pen papers. So the pen papers started by Ruby in August of 2021 and went until I don't know when, according to Kevin. The stuff she wrote in the pen papers, she wouldn't write in her journal, according to Kevin. And I find that to be interesting because the things in the journal were already horrendous. What nightmares are made out of, detailing physical abuse that she was actively repeating on her children. So the things in the pen papers, for that to be things that she wouldn't write in her journal, and we know how bad the journal was very telling to me. But he also said these papers weren't intended for anyone to read them until God would decree them to be written as scripture for the whole world to read. So we're already getting into this extremism, weirdo kind of behavior. Officers then say they believe that is what they have in their possession, but it's kind of this unsure thing for a little while during the interview. Kevin went on to explain how the pen papers had all the visions and trances that Ruby and Jodi went through, hundreds of pages. It was given to Jodi when she left and returned to her home in January. Then the officers say that they don't have it. Kevin says it's something Jodi would not want to be found, but she wouldn't want to destroy it. Officers say that they found an empty one, and Kevin suggested maybe they emptied it. Like maybe they took all the pages out of the leather folder and it was just a leather folder that was left. Kevin then asks if they are interested in Pam. The pen papers will tie Pam to all of this because of what's in those documents. So Pam, here's my question for everyone. Why is Pam not under a full investigation? Because Pam surely had her hands so deep into this nonsensical bullshit that Ruby and Jodi were producing. In my opinion, she needs to be under full investigation. But we will learn more about Pam's kind of role in all of this as we go on. This is also the point in the interview where Kevin first mentions the Page Hannah family. The Page Hannah family will also have a huge role to play in kind of things that led up to Ruby and Jodi being on their own and abusing Ruby's children. Kevin then said that things got strange in the fall of 2021 after Jodi had talked to Chad, whom is now a legal adult, which is why I use his name. So Jodi talked to Chad in 2019 when they were on a trip to the East Coast. Then things got weird in the fall of 2020 when the Hannahs were trying to bring Ruby into connections, focusing on having happier relationships and focusing on lust versus love. Ruby asked Kevin to attend a conference in 2019 regarding this. Around 100 people attended that conference. Kevin thought it was a group of man-hating women wanting to tear their husbands down. Due to peer pressure, Kevin started the Connections men's group in 2020. At that point in time, only about 10 men were in this group. Their main focus was on porn and drug addiction. Kevin spent 3 months with this group. He wanted to leave, but was challenged to have a vulnerable conversation about how his lustful decisions had affected her life, her meaning Ruby. Kevin then talks again about the beanbag, a chapter of the 8 Passengers channel. It caused them to lose 90% of their income. Ruby was upset about this and went to Jodi for support. I found that part to be a little interesting because you're upset about something and you're going to Jodi instead of talking through things with your husband, who is supposed to be your life partner. And at this point in time, he has not said that things are falling apart at the seams. So she's going to Jodi. I found that to be a little interesting. In the fall of 2020, Kevin also starts speaking at conferences. Moving on to spring of 2021, after a Connections conference, during a conversation with the women, Jodi claimed that she was being tormented by shadowy figures nightly. This is where Jodi enters, in my opinion, wackadoodleville. Kevin said a few months later that the Hannahs picked up Jodi and brought her to their home. Jodi stayed there for 6 weeks. According to Jodi, she was held against her will for 6 weeks and escaped. But according to the Hannahs, they kicked Jodi out because she was stabbing herself with knives and forks and trying to seduce the husband. Kevin then says, he's unsure of what the truth really is and kind of sits in the middle on it. This is one thing, I believe him. Like, if he wasn't there, like, who's to really say what actually happened? So that is one thing I can say. Like, he's probably being honest. He has no clue what to think because he wasn't there. So either way, moving on, he then said that after the situation with the Hannahs, Jodi was just a hot mess, and she contacted Ruby. Ruby loved this opportunity because she wanted to be the most liked by Jodi and was jealous of the Hannahs' relationship with Jodi. Kevin said Ruby always wanted to be the most popular and most liked, and that stemmed back from her childhood, always seeking validation, always wanting to be heard, always wanted to be seen, always wanted to be liked, loved, admired, blah, blah, blah. And I think that part is interesting because it ties in with all of the attention that she was getting on social media. Whether good, bad, or indifferent, I think that when you have somebody who wants so badly to be validated and liked, they will take the likeness and admiration from strangers online. And there for a while, there were many people that really supported 8 Passengers and what they were doing on YouTube. As scary as that is, it is just the truth. They didn't get millions of followers because people hated Ruby the whole time. May of 2021 is the first time that Kevin went to Ruby's house. And I thought this was interesting because he said, it blew his mind being there. How does a therapist live like this? He asked himself. Kevin said that she opened up about her troubles. Kevin then gloats about how smart he is and how he's an engineer and a professor and has worked on building some really cool stuff. And he can't explain some of the stuff that happened when they were there. Like crashes in the basement while they were talking upstairs, plates flying off by themselves, like just like flying out of the cabinet, off the, counter, whatever. He says, I can't explain it. I saw it with my own eyes. Ruby was convinced that we could intervene and help Jodi. I didn't want anything to do with it. So Kevin's claiming that he was trying to wash his hands of this and things continue to progress anyway. Kevin wanted Jodi to go to the church and her support network. Ruby continued to push Kevin into helping Jodi instead, focusing on how Jodi's reputation could be ruined if this got out. And they ended up going down a couple more times between May and August. But by August, her Bishop Scott was going over there, spending 4 hours fighting evil spirits. He got to a point where he just couldn't do it anymore. Then it was suggested they bring Jodi to their house, and Kevin said no, but was beaten over the head and ended up giving in. Absolutely wild. Like, what? So we already see how bad things are, and now you want to bring her to our home where our children live, where we are trying to raise children and have a safe, calm, relaxing environment. You are willing to bring this woman back to our house. Kevin said he thought that he could turn this situation into something fun, but it ended up being a crazy house. When Jodi came to their house, lights started turning off and on their own, sounds of footsteps in the ceiling and in the walls, stuff floating around. He said it was weird and he hated it. He became the resident exorcist. Now, granted, he says he would give blessings over her when she went into possessions. Ruby then started staying with Jodi in the same bed to help her fight the demons. What do you think that Ruby and Jodi were doing behind closed doors when they were sleeping in bed at night? It has been speculated many different times on whether their professional relationship turned into a personal relationship. Now that Kevin has said this, if we're going to take his word at face value, I think that the writing is on the wall. Tell me how y'all feel about that down below. Kevin said how it was his duty to watch the kids during this period of time because they started doing interventions. Ruby said that she started seeing Jesus, and Pam and Jodi and her would do these interventions locked in a room for 5 hours. Sometimes they would come out on cloud 9, according to Kevin. What was really going on for those 5 hours? That's my question. They would come out saying that they had visions. We have work to do from God. We're bringing all of this stuff to the world. Kevin wanted to move on with life around October. Jodi flipped out because Chad was in the yard with friends during one of their interventions. This is also the first time that Ruby asked for separation from Kevin. The new rules were weird, he explained. Kevin could leave when he wanted, but wasn't allowed to come back home until given permission. No entering the kitchen to eat without permission. The upper level where Jodi would roam, according to Kevin, was off limits fully, so he is not allowed to the upper level of his own house during this period of time. The separation kept going until the holidays. Jodi ends up going back to her home in Ivins. By this time, Pam and Jodi were fully convinced. They were fully convinced they had to do this work that God wanted them to do. He thought that it was crazy, Kevin, according to him. Ruby wanted to legally give Jodi 8 passengers and become an employee of Connections. I found that to be really wild. The Franke YouTube manager said, no, there's some major red flags. You might be scammed here. Don't do it. July 2022, Ruby comes back from a trip to Arizona with Pam and Jodi, where she went into Mexico to buy prescription drugs for emergency kits. You know, this is just like completely unhinged, insane activity. Upon her return, she asked Kevin to leave the house. Kevin was still in the Connections men group, but he got knocked to the bottom. He said that the men wanted whatever, they would do whatever Jodi wanted them to do, and she was basically like the alpha. They would do literally anything that she requested them to. Once they were in the separation, he knew that the only way he could get back into his house and with his family was to get Jodi's approval. No matter what he did, he was called a liar. He questioned his own sanity. He became more and more isolated. The few men that would talk to him eventually cut him off because Jodi said that he was being manipulative. Lying, stealing, all of these things that Ruby and Jodi tell other people that they're doing while they are actively abusing children. He talks about how bad he was made to feel when he was called manipulative and all of these things. He also talked about how when Jodi would be in these possessions, she would have these different voices. She would refer to things like Satan's bride. It's really weird stuff. What I want to say about this is that please consider that this is just a couple of years ago. And this is a family, talking about Kevin, you know, leader of the family. He is somebody who went through all of this stuff, and there is not a single video, there is not a single voice memo, there is not a single photo, there is not a single anything. And this is somebody who was used to vlogging his life and capturing moments on electronic devices. Do you think that the Frankies did not have cameras in their home? And maybe Kevin, just all of these different crazy things that were happening, he never once thought, let me at least capture the audio of this. It's just a question. I have trouble trusting something that somebody is saying when they neglected their role as a parent. So all of this wild and crazy stuff, did all of it happen? Did some of it happen? Did none of it happen? I'm not sure. But in this second interview, Kevin certainly put on a show for these officers. Everybody is talking about the second interview. Clips going viral over on TikTok. People making fun of Jodi. It's wild because it is a wild story. But how do y'all feel about this? Do you fully believe it? Do you kind of believe it? Do you have questions because there's no actual evidence and you kind of look at Kevin a little sideways? I can't wait to see what y'all have to say about this. I will link this interview in my description box in case y'all want to hear the audio for yourself. I'm sure a lot of y'all have already listened to it at least once or at least heard clips. But if you haven't, it is in my description box for y'all. So I can't wait to see what you'll have to say. This is super wild, but a part of me is also like, okay, this was his second interview with law enforcement. Was this an effort to try to look like the sane one in a room full of crazies? Because Ruby and Jodi and Pam and, all these people, I do think that, especially Ruby and Jodi, I don't have to be a psychiatrist or psychologist to say that those two women are absolutely batshit crazy with the things that they're saying. Jodi's still not taking any accountability from her jailhouse phone calls.
Nightmare here, Dennis. Nobody wants the truth.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the truth. Nobody wants the truth because these kids, I told Doug, I woke up, the Spirit told me, it's all the devil. I mean, you've seen him. I mean, I've known you, for 5 years? You've watched him come at me, come at me, come at me, come at me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exactly right, because he knows I know what he's doing. And he uses these kids. And he uses all of us as the adults, the parents, that don't hold the kids accountable. So now it's to make a kid sleep on the floor. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You can't even raise your kids anymore.
So what I'm saying is you're being crucified in public opinion.
Yeah.
So your fear has to be super prepared. And the only way he's going to get prepared is if you push him and ride him.
Okay, I will. I'll call him today.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem really animated. He seems like, the pictures are going to destroy you. And I'm like, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. Those pictures we did not do. He did that to himself, yes. Did we put that on him and then he rubbed around and cut himself? Yes. But we didn't do that. I was almost done. I had a guy from a ward that I was staying. I was at their ward. He came over and he gave me a blessing, and he told me probably about 2 months ago. He said, and he doesn't know anything about me. He doesn't know about what I do for a living or anything. And he goes, what you've been doing is going to change. You're going to be teaching differently in the next little while.
Wow.
Like, what in the world? I mean, Ryan, I know this sounds crazy, and I still can't put my finger on why it feels this way, but it feels like I was being set up to end up here.
Oh, my God.
I know that sounds bizarro. I mean, I should be here. I haven't done anything wrong.
Right, but my goodness.
You have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Run out of time.
But it was like everything got taken out of the house, and it's in the storage unit so that I could come to jail. It sounds crazy, but it really feels that way.
Oh,
and
that's,
I don't know if I'm going to be like some kind of example, but when I get out of here, I have a story to tell, and I am going to try to do everything I can to protect the children, because that's what's happening, is that kids are being horribly.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of the kids, anyways, it's a story, but when you come on about it.
Yeah. Okay, so
is he trying to make himself look like the sane one? I don't know. I'll be checking the comments to see what y'all have to say. So for now, if you like the video, please leave a like and a comment. And if you'd like to see more from me in the future, please subscribe. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.